Imagine a place on Earth with no inhabitants, no borders, no crops, perhaps not even a sunset. A place where sunlight visits for only a few fleeting weeks each year, then disappears, yielding to months of unrelenting, frozen darkness. The wind here doesn't blow, it howls. The air is dry as ash, and the temperature can end a life within minutes without proper protection. It is not an island. Nor is it quite a continent by any conventional definition. It is Antarctica, the land at the edge of the world's map, and perhaps the edge of human imagination. No one lives there. No cities. No wars. No territorial disputes. A vast white expanse, utterly isolated, seemingly devoid of surface life, yet strangely more protected than any other place on Earth. In 1959, at the height of the Cold War, amid global arms races and espionage, 12 of the world's most powerful nations signed an unprecedented agreement, the Antarctic Treaty. It banned all military activity, resource exploitation, and destructive experimentation across this entire land. Since then, more than 50 nations, both allies and enemies, have abided by that treaty with surprising unity. A rare consensus in human history, otherwise riddled with conflict and division. And so, the quiet questions began to rise. Why forbid it? Why guard a land that no one seems to want? If Antarctica is nothing but ice and rock, then what needs hiding so carefully? We were taught it's harmless. And yet, small clues begin to leak. Satellite images hint at geometric shapes beneath the ice. Ancient maps from the 16th century depict this region in detailed, ice-free form. Prophets speak of a civilization that sleeps. And old myths whisper of a sealed gate, buried since prehistoric times, now quietly cracking open. Could it be that what lies beneath the ice is not simply ice, but an ancient intelligence, a memory? Or even, a warning that humanity is not yet ready to hear? Gates buried in ice. When we look down at Antarctica from satellites, it appears as nothing more than an endless white ocean, vast, silent, indifferent. But some researchers, whose eyes do not merely observe but also question, have noticed that this white expanse is not as smooth as it seems. Beneath its seemingly uniform surface lie patterns that do not belong to nature. In 2012, and again in 2015, satellite images from Google Earth spread across alternative research forums. They revealed a nearly 3-kilometer-long skid mark carved into the ice, extending from a sunken geological depression, almost as if a massive object had once fallen, then slid. The trail looked remarkably fresh, untouched by time or snowdrift, leading many to suspect this was no ancient artifact, but a recent phenomenon, perhaps within the last few years. Not far from there, a symmetrical, three-sided structure resembling a pyramid juts out from the ice, its peak exposed like a decapitated mountain. While mainstream scientists dismiss it as a randomly symmetrical ice mountain, independent researchers argue otherwise. The form appears too precise, too proportional, its angles suggesting intention, not accident. And that's not all. Several rectangular gateways, partially buried in snow, have also been spotted, like entrances to something once accessible, now halfway entombed. Some photos even show long, straight rows of ice steps extending for hundreds of meters, perfectly aligned, unnaturally even. Nature, it seems, rarely carves such geometry by chance. From these observations, a hypothesis, bold, unsettling, begins to take shape. Could it be that beneath kilometers of ancient ice lie the ruins of a lost city, one that once thrived when Antarctica was still green, long before pole shifts turned it into the wasteland we know today? Some independent scholars believe these structures do not belong to modern humans, but are remnants of a vanished civilization, one that may have built temples, cities, perhaps even outposts, and vanished with Earth's axial shift, entombed in millennia of frost. But unlike the sands of Egypt, where excavation is not only permitted but celebrated, Antarctica remains untouched. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 forbids all resource extraction, all military activity, all archaeological digs. It is, in essence, the perfect restricted zone, a vault of secrets that no one is allowed to open. And it is precisely this ironclad prohibition that has fueled growing suspicion. That buried beneath the ice is not merely ancient rock and forgotten soil, but a gate. Something that has been sealed. Or perhaps locked away. And if the markings in the ice are real, then perhaps that gate is beginning to move. Antarctica was once a green jungle. Today, when we look at Antarctica, all we see is a frozen continent, a place where nothing survives except screaming winds and a dim light that feels like the sun's final breath. But buried beneath more than 3,000 meters of ice lies a past that even mainstream science can no longer deny. Antarctica was once a lush, living land, an actual forest. In 2012, during an ice core drilling expedition in Queen Maud Land, a vast region in eastern Antarctica, scientists made a discovery that defied belief: traces of pollen, fibrous plant material, and even upright fossilized tree stumps, still standing, as if frozen in an instant. This overturned the theory that Antarctica slowly froze over through gradual geological shifts. Instead, the untouched tree trunks, the intact plant tissues, suggest a sudden freeze, as if some catastrophic, instant glaciation had occurred. This aligns with earlier geological evidence. Around 50 million years ago, Antarctica had a subtropical climate. Soil samples reveal the presence of broadleaf trees, flowering plants, insects, amphibians, even prehistoric crocodiles, creatures that could not survive in today's icy wasteland. But what has truly puzzled researchers is not that Antarctica was once warm. It's how fast it changed. Ice core and sediment isotope analyses show that Antarctica didn't lose its temperate climate over millions of years like other continents. The shift was abrupt, almost as if an invisible force had flipped a switch, turning a thriving forest into a frozen tomb in just a few generations. And if such a warm, life-sustaining climate once existed, why have we found no signs of intelligent life? Or perhaps, those traces are still there, merely sleeping beneath layers of ice that no one is allowed to uncover. A theory begins to take shape, seemingly outlandish, yet not easily dismissed. If there were forests, rivers, and livable conditions, could there have once been a prehistoric human community? Or even a proto-civilization? If they lived here, where did they go? What did they leave behind? And could it be that every trace was not buried by time, but erased by a catastrophe from the skies? The strangeness deepens when we look into the myths of South America's indigenous peoples, such as the Mapuche and the Selknam. They speak of a southern land where white gods once descended, bringing light, knowledge, and things not of this world. But then, these gods retreated into a frozen realm, vanishing with the cold winds. Coincidence? Or are these faint memories, echoes from a time when humans may have once encountered a land that was never meant to be named? And if Antarctica was once green, perhaps it never truly died. Perhaps it is only sleeping, waiting for someone bold enough to awaken its memory. The Ptah mystery and the map that shouldn't exist. In 1929, within the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul, an old piece of gazelle skin was unexpectedly discovered. On its dark brown surface were intricate drawings, depicting continents, sea routes, and maritime paths. But what stunned the academic world wasn't the artistry, it was the content. That piece of skin was the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman naval admiral, Piri ibn Haji Mehmed, better known as Piri Reis. He was a sailor, a cartographer, and a seeker of knowledge. But the most astonishing detail was this. The map clearly depicts the northern coastline of Antarctica, without ice. This should be impossible. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered by humans until 1820. And it wasn't until the 20th century that seismic radar scans revealed the true landmass beneath several kilometers of solid ice. So how could a sailor from the early 16th century, living more than 300 years before modern technology, have accurately charted a region completely buried under ice? According to notes left by Piri Reis himself, he did not gather all the data firsthand. He claimed his map was compiled using ancient maps from before the Great Flood, acquired from Spanish sailors following the conquest of the New World. Some of those source maps, he wrote, were believed to have originated from the Library of Alexandria, or even more ancient sources. This specific claim inspired historian and geographer Charles Hapgood, a professor at Keene State College in the United States. In the 1950s, Hapgood proposed a controversial theory. That the Piri Reis map serves as indirect evidence of a lost seafaring civilization, possibly Atlantis. Hapgood suggested that before Antarctica was frozen over, a highly advanced culture had accurately measured and mapped the globe. Their charts were copied and passed down across generations, eventually falling into the hands of Piri Reis, who reassembled them through the lens of his own era. Mainstream scholars, however, rejected this theory. They argued that the supposed accuracy could be coincidence, misinterpretation, or simply unintentional error. But still, no one could adequately explain why the bays, capes, and overall coastline of southern Antarctica on the Piri Reis map so closely match modern maps generated using ice-penetrating radar. This was not something that could have been guessed. And so the quiet question returns. Could this map be a surviving relic of an intelligence that once existed before us, then vanished beneath the ice? Could the legends of a sunken civilization be more than allegory, but fragments of memory, suffocated by time? And if that is true, then Antarctica is not merely an unexplored frontier, but the final archive of a history we were never meant to remember. Edgar Cayce's prophecy and the shifting of Earth's poles. Among the most controversial prophets of the 20th century, Edgar Cayce remains a name shrouded in both mystery and awe. Unlike scientists or philosophers, Cayce did not work with instruments or theories. He dreamed awake, entering spontaneous trances where he spoke of things far beyond his time. One of his most haunting and well-known prophecies was about Antarctica. Cayce once declared, with a voice as cold as the ice he spoke of, "A time will come when Antarctica will once again be a fertile land, and secrets of the early days of mankind will be revealed from beneath layers of ice thousands of years old." A claim that seemed absurd. Yet what drew modern researchers back to Cayce wasn't his mysticism, it was the fact that many of his once dismissed statements are beginning to align with scientific discoveries. In Cayce's time, no one entertained the idea that Antarctica once supported plant life. But in 2012, as we now know, scientists uncovered pollen, fossilized wood, and upright tree trunks in Antarctic ice cores, clear signs that this was once a rich, complex ecosystem, not merely a frozen desert. But Cayce went further. He repeatedly warned of a coming pole shift, an event in which Earth's axis would change, dramatically altering global climates. He offered no physical evidence, yet described the phenomenon with a precision that sent chills through those who heard it. Then, in the year 2000, NASA and major geological agencies officially acknowledged Earth's axis is indeed shifting, slowly, by a few centimeters each year, due to melting ice caps, seismic activity, and redistribution of mass across the globe. But some sediment core studies and ancient lava flow analyses suggest something far more shocking. That in Earth's distant past, the axis may have shifted rapidly, resulting in catastrophic climate upheaval, not over millennia, but within decades, or even just a few seasons. If such an event had truly occurred, if a once temperate land like Antarctica had been positioned near the equator, only to be violently displaced toward the South Pole, then what became of the civilizations that may have lived there? They would have had no time to flee. No time to adapt. Only a sudden, endless winter, descending like a sentence passed by the cosmos. No earthquakes. No fires. Just ice, burying every trace, like the hand of time drawing a curtain over the past. And if Cayce was right, that this ice is not eternal, but a storage vault for what was once forgotten, then one day, as Antarctica melts, as the ice fractures under the pressure of climate change and the Earth's silent internal shifts, old gates will begin to open. Not just for explorers, but for history itself. For truths humanity once tried to forget, or was never allowed to remember. The question is no longer, was Casey right? But rather, if he was, what are we about to uncover? Lake Vostok and the ecosystem beneath the ice. Beneath Antarctica's miles-thick blanket of ice, what seems like a lifeless, frozen tomb, flows a hidden world of quiet waters, silently preserving a realm that has never seen sunlight. According to modern geological research, over 400 subglacial lakes have been discovered beneath Antarctica's permafrost. These lakes remain unfrozen, not because of sunlight, but due to immense pressure and geothermal heat rising from Earth's core, keeping the water in a liquid state even as surface temperatures plummet below -60 degrees Celsius. But among them, one name stands out, both thrilling and unsettling to the scientific world: Lake Vostok. Buried beneath more than 4,000 meters of ice, Lake Vostok is larger than Canada's Lake Ontario. What makes it extraordinary is not just its size, but its isolation. It has been sealed off from Earth's atmosphere for millions of years. A completely untouched ecosystem, one that has never known air, light, or any form of modern biology. A frozen moment in time, where the ancient world may still be alive, undisturbed. In 2012, when a Russian drilling team finally reached the lake's surface, something strange happened. A jet of vapor burst upward from 4 kilometers deep, like the exhale of something that had held its breath for far too long. Inside that vapor, researchers found unknown microorganisms, life forms with no genetic resemblance to anything previously catalogued on Earth. Were they remnants of ancient life? Or the product of an entirely separate evolutionary branch, developed in total darkness, without oxygen, and untouched by the rest of the planet? And a more unsettling thought emerged. If microbial life could survive and adapt here for millions of years, could something else have evolved alongside it? Something we've never seen, because no one has ever looked. Nearby lies another mystery, dubbed Lake Enigma by researchers. Satellite imagery revealed a tree-like fissure in its basin, a formation unlike any recorded natural geological phenomenon. Its branching lines spread outward like blood vessels, or pathways leading from some kind of structured design. No one knows if it's a crack, a subsurface water flow, or something that once moved within. And so we arrive at the question no one wants to ask. But no one dares to ignore. After millions of years of total isolation, could life beneath the Antarctic ice have evolved beyond anything we've ever known? And is it now, silently, waiting just beneath our feet? No one can say whether such life is still harmless. Because harmlessness is a label we assign to what we understand. And that which lies buried may not need to be understood to begin acting. Antarctica, the uninhabited continent, is no longer just a wasteland of ice and stone. It is now Earth's oldest natural laboratory. A place no one enters easily. And perhaps should not enter too hastily. Blood falls, the bleeding wound in the ice. In a place seemingly frozen for eternity, where everything lies locked in Antarctica's absolute cold, there exists a strange flow. A red wound that never stops bleeding. They call it Blood Falls, deep within Taylor Valley, one of the driest and coldest regions on Earth. From within the eternal glacier, a stream of deep crimson liquid seeps out, spreading like human blood, trailing down across the pale, ghostly white of the frozen lake below. No one can look away. No one can witness it without a shiver. At first, early 20th century explorers assumed it was red algae. But science soon revealed the truth: it is highly iron-rich saltwater, trapped for millions of years beneath the ice. When exposed to air, the iron oxidizes, turning blood red. It sounds simple. But the real mystery is not in the color. It is in the question: why is it still flowing? That reservoir of brine should have run dry millennia ago. So what is keeping this wound alive, bleeding, as if some unseen heart still beats beneath the ice? In 2009, a turning point in Blood Falls research forced scientists to reconsider everything. When they drilled deeper into its source, they didn't just find salt and iron. They found living microorganisms, surviving under the most extreme conditions imaginable. No light, no oxygen, no tolerable temperatures. Yet still thriving. These bacteria weren't merely surviving. They had evolved along an entirely separate biological path, using chemical cycles never before observed in any known life form on Earth. As if they weren't creatures from the surface world, but residents of a sealed realm, long forgotten. And from there, the fringe theories began. Some proposed that blood falls is not just a natural phenomenon, but the leaking remnants of something far older. A biological machine, or ancient technology, now bleeding after eons of silence. Mystics speak of it as Antarctica's wounded heart. A place where some ancient consciousness lies frozen. And now, at last, is trying to speak, dripping messages like a forgotten cry for help. Because what makes blood falls so disturbing isn't the blood-red hue. It's the strange, sentient feeling that the wound is watching you. And with every droplet that escapes, a message is delivered. Not from nature, but from something older than human history. Something that never wished to be awakened. Creatures beyond myth, Ningan and the Kraken. Not all legends are born from imagination. Some are transcribed from the trembling memories of those who witnessed something no human was ever meant to see. And if there is any place on Earth that still conceals beings that do not belong to this world, it is Antarctica. In recent years, among Japanese sailors, a chilling name has spread like a shadow whispered across the waves, Ningan. A colossal entity, said to be up to 30 meters tall, with skin as pale as snow, gliding silently beneath the water, its presence alone enough to unsettle the bravest souls. Ningan is described as eerily humanoid, eyes, mouth, arms, even fingers. But with a body soft and shapeless, as if its flesh never belonged to anything Earth has ever catalogued. There are no clear photos. Only grainy videos, fleeting silhouettes breaching the ice, then vanishing, as if they had never been there at all. And yet, the testimonies number in the dozens. Perhaps hundreds. From fishermen, sailors, even members of polar biology expeditions. The only common thread? Fear. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was too silent, too human-like. And seemed to be watching. But Ningan is not the only whisper from the deep. In a satellite image that surfaced in 2016, a massive black shape was seen beneath a thin sheet of water, near the Antarctic ice shelf. Its outline curved like a beast in motion, stretching an estimated 60 meters in length. Some independent analysts claimed it resembled the trail of a living creature, large, heavy, and ancient. The internet quickly gave it a name, the Antarctic Kraken. Unlike the Norse Kraken, often dismissed as seafaring myth, this southern cousin arrived with more unsettling implications. Sliding ice trails, anomalous oceanic swells, and deep-sea sonar echoes that match no known species. Could it be a living fossil, a survivor from the last ice age? Or perhaps something else? A classified biological experiment, nurtured in Antarctica's perfect isolation. A place where nations could hide things no one dares speak of. We do not have answers. Only traces. A few frozen drops of fish blood. A strange satellite anomaly. And the soft knock on a ship's hull at 3 a.m., in a sea where no one can reply. Antarctica remains. With its snow, its ice. And the creatures no one dares to name. Because once you name them, they might turn to face you. Nazi footprints, Operation Highjump and Agartha. Antarctica, a desolate land devoured by snow and ice, should have been a place no one would willingly enter. And yet, in the shadows of history, there were those who chose it as the final destination for their most ambitious dreams. And from those very first footprints, a chain of unexplained events began. In 1938, while the world was being pulled into the chaos of war, Nazi Germany launched a large-scale expedition to Antarctica. They named the territory they claimed Neuschwabenland, New Swabia, located in the eastern region of the frozen continent. But this was no ordinary exploration. Post-war records suggest that the Germans built infrastructure beneath the ice, including weather stations, supply depots, and, according to many unofficial sources, a secret underground base known as Base 211. Their true objective? No one knows for certain. But many independent researchers believe it wasn't merely a refuge, but a site for testing technology far beyond its time, including disc-shaped flying craft, what some now refer to as the Nazi UFOs. But Germany's defeat in 1945 was not the end of the story. In 1946, the United States launched a massive military operation to Antarctica. Called Operation Highjump. Over 4,000 troops, 13 warships, and dozens of aircraft were dispatched to an uninhabited frozen land. Officially, it was described as training in cold conditions. But the sheer scale matched that of an invasion force. The expedition was led by famed explorer Admiral Richard E. Byrd. And what cast a chilling shadow over the entire event was his secret diary. In it, Byrd recounted that he and his flight crew encountered a hidden realm beneath the ice, a place with mild climate, lush greenery, and disc-shaped crafts flying in the skies. He described being escorted into an underground city, where he met tall, blonde beings who claimed to be ancient guardians of Earth. They spoke in archaic English, and warned humanity of the dangers we create, nuclear weapons, greed, and the loss of harmony with nature. It sounds like mythology. And yet, his story eerily mirrors one of the oldest legends ever told. Agartha. Agartha is the name of a hidden underground kingdom found in Tibetan, Buddhist, Hindu, and even ancient Western texts. A realm where technology and spirituality merge, and where ancient beings, Nephilim, giants, and pre-Adamic species, still dwell. And if there is an entrance to Agartha, then Antarctica, with its seclusion, ancient ice caves, and unexplainable activities, may well be the final door left unsealed. The greatest question. Why have all official documents on Operation Highjump remained top secret for over 75 years? If it was merely a military training exercise, why bury it beneath layers of classified silence? Perhaps what they saw in Antarctica did not belong to this world. Perhaps a real gate was opened, one that must never be spoken of again. Antarctica, Earth's memory machine. To most, Antarctica is simply the end of the Earth. A barren, frozen wasteland. No life. No history. No meaning. But perhaps, it is that very silence that has deceived us. Because beneath those kilometers of ancient ice lies more than just rock and frost. Lies memory. The memory of a different Earth. When Antarctica was once a lush forest, with rivers, trees, and living creatures. The memory of a warm continent, suddenly turned to ice. As if someone had flipped a switch, freezing it all in a single, wordless instant. And if climate can be remembered, could civilization be remembered too? Ancient maps that chart ice-free coastlines, centuries before satellites were even imagined. Subglacial lakes, untouched by sunlight for millions of years, holding ecosystems alien to our world. Blood-red stains oozing from the ice. And stories that never truly end, of flying discs, colossal beings, and underground kingdoms. Antarctica is not merely snow and wind. It is the planet's greatest archive. A memory machine, preserving all that history once tried to bury. From lost climates, to forgotten life, to possibilities that human language still fails to name. We have dug beneath the pyramids of Egypt, traced cuneiform along the rivers of Mesopotamia, and explored the deepest trenches of the Pacific Ocean. But Antarctica, a place where no one is truly allowed to excavate, where no one is permitted to go deep, remains an unnamed forbidden zone. The question is not, should we dig deeper? But rather, why haven't we? Who, or what, is keeping that door closed? And if indeed, There is a civilization sleeping beneath the ice. Wrapped in time, frost, and human forgetfulness. Then the final question is: are we truly ready to awaken it? Or are we still unprepared to face the oldest truth of who we really are?